Today I'm going to paint a swamp creature holding a very dirty martini. I'm Melanie Florio and welcome to my studio. I paint quirky, nostalgic paintings in a realistic style. Paint along with me if you'd like. Ever since my friend showed up to a Halloween party in this, I knew that I wanted to paint him. And that turned into, what other Halloween creatures can I paint? And then it was, let's have them all holding classic cocktails. Like Dracula could be holding a Bloody Mary, and the Swamp Man is holding a very dirty martini. So I think this idea is sticking with me and I'm gonna see it through. And I would love your help on it. If you have any ideas, please put them in the comments. Okay, for this week, we're going to need these supplies. Turpentine, a jar for your turpentine, palette paper, a palette knife, liquid fine detail, maybe linseed oil, I'll get into that later, some brushes. We're gonna need a big puffy blending brush. We're gonna need some sable brushes for blending and detail, and we're going to need some natural bristle brushes for getting that paint in. We're also going to need some tape to make a crisp edge for the Martini Glass, and last but not least, oil paint. Then comes my favorite part, picking out the colors. I like to think about picking colors for a painting like the way I would choose an outfit or the way I would design a room. So for this moody, swampy feel, I wanted to create a romantic light. So I envisioned that the moon would be light pink and all of the light falling on him would be light pink. The shadows would be more in the bluer side. So let's get started. Using the initial reference of my friend at the Halloween party, I took that reference, but I knew the background needed to be a swamp. A moonlit swamp, something romantic, where he's gazing off, thinking about the love of his life back in the corner of the swamp. I don't know. I was just thinking about things. So I looked up photos of swamps and dreamt up kind of a background. I wanted a central composition. I wanted steam behind him. Next, I took the photos that I found, combined it into a sketch in Procreate. And if you would like, I would love to share that sketch with you so that you could use that as your reference if you want to paint along with me. Email me swampmonster@sketch@melanieflorio.com and I'll send you a copy. You can use it to create your own swamp monster. And please share what you do because I want this to inspire you as much as it inspired me. Okay, now that I have the colors picked out, I can get into the drawing. So I'm using yellow ochre thinned with some turpentine. I like yellow ochre because it's a nice neutral color and it's very easy to both erase and to paint on top of without it affecting the top layer of paint. So I go about doing the basic shapes and outlines of my drawing. I don't want to put any extra detail in this layer because I need to paint the basics before I get into the details. I need to remind myself, keep it simple. Next, I'm interested in filling in the basic shapes. So first I go in with my Indithrone blue and I fill that background in. And then I use my rag, which is just an old t-shirt that coincidentally I got paint on. So cut it up, made rags, and I used that and subtracted out the light from the shape to create this moody swamp atmosphere. This is called the subtractive technique. It's a really good way of putting down big shapes very quickly and creating atmosphere. Now I'm painting the jacket. Using the darkest colors on my palette, I mix them together to create sort of a neutral grayish color for the jacket. And I paint the entire jacket in that color. Then I use my rag again and I erase out the lights. I pre-mixed my colors from the light to the shadow so that I could do it very quickly. Instead of doing each shape and then mixing one at a time, I like to kind of have my whole color palette made up so that I'm just ready to go. So the alizarin crimson with white is going to be my light source. Olive green is the color of the swamp creature. Indithrone blue is going to be that color that we put in the shadows. A touch of yellow ochre for your mid-tone, and this is how I would mix. So you have for your light source this light pink, which is alizarin crimson and white. We're just gonna start by lightening up the green with pink. The red and the pink is gonna neutralize the green a little bit. It's also gonna soften it a little bit. And now you're gonna grab some of that and lighten it more. Notice how on my palette knife, the paint is on the bottom, not the top. And you kind of scrape and push it down. That's the way I like to mix. If it gets on the top, it just gets a little messier. And then you're gonna take some of that color and lighten it up. So this is a really good way of starting to get your palette Notice how it's starting to turn a little bit pink, which I love. And now for your shadows. So we need to clean the palette knife. We're gonna take our rag or paper towel. Paper towel works great. Now for your darker colors, we've got the green here, just a touch of the blue. So the swamp creature is surrounded by blue, right? The sky is blue, but the light source is pink. So you want those shadows to echo the atmosphere. So that's why it's important to put a little bit of blue in the shadow color. That's the same reason it's important to put a little pink in the light source, so that the atmosphere is in the swamp creature also. It's like atmosphere is so much having to do with color mixing. Atmosphere and color mixing, it goes hand in hand. And for the midtones, I also added just a touch of the yellow ochre, kind of just because I didn't want it to just be green with more pink and more pink and more pink. This way, it transitioned a little bit into this warmer color. Just added another element of complexity to the range of colors. And that's how I did it. Okay, I can't take it anymore. I've got to get into that face now. I started with the dark shapes of the eyes, then I went on to the nose, went on to the shadow shapes of the mouth, and then I continued the shadow shapes along the side of the face. The next thing that I did was I put that light pink light on the highlights of his forehead, his cheek, and around the corners of his mouth. I put the light on because it's sort of like looking at the light at the end of the tunnel. You know where you're going. It helps me find my way. My highlight color happens to be light pink because the moon is light pink. Now, the basic idea is that my highlights are going to have the light pink in them. The transitional colors are going to have a little bit more yellow ochre in them and be green in the face, obviously. And then the shadow colors are going to have the blue in them. The reason is because the atmosphere is blue, right? So that's going to be reflecting all over the sides of the face, the sides of the suit. But then that moon, that light source, is going to have that pink sparkle all over the painting that will make it feel light and whimsy and romantic. What I'm going for.
Now I go onto the hand and I put the shadow shapes in first, followed by those middle values. And then I finish off with the light, which is on top because the moon is above the hand. And so the lightest value will be where the moon is, on top. Then I'm going on to the Martini glass and I'm going to subtract out that bottom shape of the glass because it's easier than drawing it, and subtract out a few of my mistakes along the way.
Now I can go on to the shirt colors. So I wanted to do sort of pinkish magenta for the ruffles, so I put that in next. Then I laid in the other colors of the shirt. So now it's at a point where everything is covered. This is a very exciting step because now I can finally stand back. I stand back all the way on the other side of my studio and I look at this painting. And it should look like an interesting abstract collection of shapes. I like to think of it this way. The best representational paintings have an equally great abstract underneath. If the abstract shapes are working, then I can go into the detail and I'll know that the painting is going to be interesting from across the room. And in this case, I do like it when I stand back. I like that we've got a green circle for the head, a yellow triangle for the martini, and 2 strips of bacon for the suit. What are those things called? Those are the lapels, the ruffles. It's on the shirt, but I don't know what oh, okay. So a circle, a triangle, and 2 pink rectangles for the ruffles. And it's all surrounded in this navy blue. I think it's working. So I'm gonna get into the detail. I'm getting the details in. So the first thing I wanna do is get the color of the background that I'm envisioning, which is sort of a teal sky with a pink moon and navy blue shadows. So I get that teal in first. Next, I use my puffy Martha Stewart crafting brush and I just swipe it all over to blend afterwards to create this soft haze in the background.
And now I'm going in with my favorite blending brush. It's a sable brush and it can do such fine, delicate blending. So I love it for that. It was much more expensive than the Martha Stewart brush, but worth it as it has lasted me years.
Now that the background color is what I wanted, I get to get into the face and add some of those wrinkles. Let's talk about wrinkles. The technique of it is hard edge, soft edge, hard edge, soft edge, hard edge. So as you can see, I Okay, so basically, you've got yourself a crisp wrinkle, right? And then as the skin folds up, it transitions and it's much softer until you get, boom, that next crisp wrinkle. So there's a lot of hard edge and soft edges happening.
Now I'm going in and refining little tiny shapes while keeping in mind this is the first day of a painting and everything is very wet. So it's really hard to get specific details at this stage. I'm just going more for the general idea of wrinkles and eyeballs and cheekbones and all of that. This little black brush is actually a nail polish art brush from Amazon.
I'm finished with my painting for day one. The way that I like to finish a painting for the day is just to soften some edges that I'm not sure about, because I hate coming back into a painting with a crisp edge that's in the wrong spot. I'd rather it be a little bit softer so I could go back in and be more decisive the next day.
I'll be able to add more details once the painting is dry.
Day two, I'm adding in some detailed shapes in the ruffles. And then I can get into those wrinkles a little bit more. And finally, my favorite part, getting into the eyes. First, I'm adding the darks of the lash line and then the pupil. And then I put a little shadow color underneath that lash line. And then finally, I can add my twinkle highlight onto that pupil. Now I'm gonna brighten up the white of the eyes. But even though I say white of the eyes, they're really not white. What I do is I take my lightest color, which in this case is light pink, and I add it with the flesh color. So in this case, the flesh color is green. So I'm taking light pink and a touch of green. I'm putting them together so they create a more natural look for the white of his eyes. So I'm gonna go in, get those shapes, and then I can add a little bit more sparkle and make them look glassy later.
Just for fun, I wanted to show you what he would look like with pure white eyes. It's pretty silly. Actually, I sort of like it, but it's not what I'm going for this painting.
And after that, I love to add a little pop for the highlight. And in this case, the swamp creature's eyes should be a little glassy, I think. So I may have gone a little overboard on the highlights, but I like the effect.
This little brush is actually from Amazon. It's a nail art kit for like painting your nails. I looked for red sable nail art brushes, and there were a few that came up with really good prices, much cheaper than going to the art store and buying a single brush. And they've lasted a while with the oils. I'm pretty happy with them. I'm still experimenting, so I can't completely recommend them yet, but I will keep you posted because I'm all about saving money on brushes, especially the tiny ones. There was a point when I started to put in the shadows of the cheekbones that this swamp man completely was channeling Frank Sinatra for me. So I just went with it. I put on some Frankie music, and I just imagined that this swamp man was sort of Frankie incarnate. You know, anything to keep you entertained while you're painting, and this one really kept me entertained for a while. Now I'm going in with the gills, and I'm using a grainer brush. These brushes are sort of straight across, but then they have these little hairs that extend past the general shape of the brush, and they're great for fur and any fine lines like wood grain and flowers also. But for now, I'm using that to add detail to the gills without having to paint a bazillion lines. Now I'm going in and I'm putting some shadow behind that front gill to show that that gill is in front and this one is behind. I'm also using a cooler color, but as you'll see in a minute, I changed my mind. That is way too cool. So I'm gonna warm it up. Here I go, warming it up and getting the general shape of it and detail. I fuss with these gills for quite a while, so I will spare you the painful noodling of it all. Just know, I probably could have done these gills much faster, but I guess I was having fun and learning, so it's all good. Finally, I'm going into the edges. I'm trying to create a harder edge. Sorry for the blur of this camera. It doesn't know what to focus on. But I'm using a fan brush that I have cut to create the perfect shape for this particular gill or fin, I guess. So as you can see, I load the brush and I press down on that edge and then just flick it up, and it creates a nice effect. I honestly think I got this brush at the 99-cent store, which makes me feel better about cutting it because you know these brushes can get expensive. And this one, though it's pretty specialized, does come in handy sometimes.
For the Martini Glass, I wanted it to have a really crisp, glassy edge. So what did I use? Yes, tape. I love using tape for a crisp edge. I put the tape on exactly where I wanted it. I actually drew a little bit with pencil also, just to make sure that the Martini Glass was symmetrical. And then I painted in the shape. I actually made one. I used water, unfortunately, and food coloring. I skewered a few olives on a branch and then threw in some grass from my garden, and it looked pretty cool. I set that up and I used that as my reference.
So here I am putting on my masking tape and adding some little shapes in the Martini Glass. I started with that bright yellow and then just continued adding tiny little shapes. Based on our observation, the Martini Glass was kind of right in front of me, so I could look at it, put in my shapes, and enjoy. I think the trickiest part was getting that top ellipse correct, and somehow I was able to do it. I actually was using one of those nail art brushes to get those tiny details in. And isn't it so satisfying to peel this tape off? So sorry, my audio is off, so you can't hear that amazing sound, but just imagine, it was glorious.
Now after that, I want to add the highlight color, not the lightest light, but that light sparkle of the eyes. So I'm using a light green. I'm putting the highlight on the highlighted side of the face, and then I'm basically drawing a diagonal line through that eye to the other side of the pupil. And so that light is going through underneath the pupil and sparkling across onto the other side. I like to do this technique, and I feel like it just gives a lot of life to eyes.
And finally, adding the small dark shapes into the eye and the little light shapes also with the nail brush, one of the nail brushes that I got from Amazon. The ones with the little plastic beads in actually are my favorite so far that I've tried. Plus, they're pretty fun. They make little noises when you paint, which is something to get used to. I think I like it. Now, the painting has been dry for about a week, and as promised, this is the way that I use linseed oil. I mix about 30% linseed oil with the rest terpenoid, and I make myself a little thin glaze. I apply it with an eyedropper because it's clean and I can keep my little solution for months at a time this way. And this basically is like a retouch varnish. I smear it over the entire painting. It makes those colors that have looked a little bit flat since they've dried, now they're popping, and it's easier to mix the same color because the colors look wet. And when you're mixing a color, obviously your paint is wet, so you want to match the wet color, as opposed to trying to match the dry color, which when you match it, it may look fine, but then when that top layer dries, it turns into a different color because I'm not sure if you know this, but when oil paint dries, it does change color slightly. So that's why a retouch varnish or a little mixture of linseed oil and turp will do the trick and make it easier to go into your painting. Please, if you're doing this, make sure that the painting is completely dry. I don't know how many times I've put on that retouch varnish and realized, oh my gosh, my painting isn't dry. And then as I'm rubbing it in, I realize the paint is smearing around. But in this case, it was dry and it looked fabulous when I put it on. I'm going back into my jacket because it looked a little mushy. So I decided to darken my shadows in the jacket and make them more of a classic navy blue. And so that's what I'm doing. And then I'm adding a brighter pink light source to the jacket and a little bit more purple into the middle tones.
After all this, I'm almost done. I just want to get a little bit more detail in the background, so I go in with a third layer of paint. And this layer I'm happy with. I put a little bit more light going through the background from one side of the painting to the other. And I also made sure that there was kind of a vignette going on to create that classic old portrait feel.
And here I go again, trying another 99-cent store product, the Makeup Blending Egg. You can buy them in big bags there, and I was trying them out for some charcoal drawings and then decided to use them on oil paintings also. I actually think it works really well for this. I'm just blending a few edges together just like you would on your face, except you wouldn't rub oil paint on your face, so maybe not, but you get the idea. Contrast helps create distance. So in this case, I'm bringing some very dark reeds into the foreground. They're just little squiggly lines that will represent there's a layer of brush and reeds in the foreground of this painting. And then as it goes back, the value jumps dramatically between the foreground reeds and the background.
Add the details of the ruffles.
For the ruffles, I honestly didn't really know how to do them, so I just went in and squiggled some lighter shapes on top of my already formed dark and light blobs, and I think for this purpose, it works. It's fun, it indicates that they're sort of lacy, and that's all I need to do. And finally, one last layer of glow on my moon. So as you can see, I'm putting on some paint on the dry surface of the painting and then using my finger and my blending brush to scumble it in. At this point, the painting has actually been dry for about 3 months now, and I've been staring at it and really liking it, but I was scrolling Facebook Marketplace one day, found this amazing frame, and went to go pick it up. It's got olive green velvet like borders. It's amazing. Anyway, it was a great deal. And so I had to have it. And when I brought it home, it fit the painting perfectly. And then I realized, oh my gosh, the green is just not quite bright enough. So it sort of actually made the painting look duller. So I went in with some glaze, and I used Old Holland Golden Green Deep, which is this gorgeous glaze color. And it made his face look so rich and glowy. And I loved it. So this is how I glaze. I use a combination of Gamsol and linseed oil, and about 40% linseed oil, 60% Gamsol. I put it in this little eyedropper, and I will mix it up and then drop just enough onto my palette next to the color that I want. I use a transparent color when I'm glazing, otherwise it creates a real foggy effect. So Indothrone Blue is a transparent blue. And like I've been telling you this entire process, I want that blue atmosphere to come through. However, it really wasn't that blue when I looked at it in the end, and then I'm laughing at myself because here I am like, you want the blue atmosphere, I want the blue atmosphere. And what's the blue? Where's the blue? I don't know. So I had to add it one more time just to lay down this information. And I'm really, really happy with the result. It finally it blends more towards blue. So then after I put it on, I mix a thin layer, put it on, rub it off with, am I using an old sock? I'm using a sock here. Oh, mismatched socks. They are such good rags. Anyway, so I'm just rubbing that in, and I finally get a touch more of blue into the shadows. Yay! I really wanted to give him a little bit more of a rose lip. And once I did the other glazes, his lips looked a little dull in comparison. So I took some Rose Madder, which is a beautiful glazing color, and I mixed it with my glazing medium and popped it on his lip. Oh, love it.
I'm pretty happy with the results. And at this point, I think I may be done.
Cheers! Thank you so much for joining me. Oh, Swamp Man, what fun we had together. And now we'll have more fun because I get to stare at you in my house.
Thank you so much for painting with me today. Come back next week. We'll do something else.
If you would like a print of this image, check out my website, melanieflorio.com.